The plate struck the floor with a deafening crash. At that very restaurant, my daughter-in-law, Harlo, hurled my dinner onto the tiles. Which you should have never come. Every single head in the room swiveled, eyes wide and fixed on our table, yet my son, Carlton, sat motionless, offering not a single word in my defense. Just days later, on Monday, she received a letter from the lawyer. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The memory still echoes, vivid and sharp. The sound of my plate shattering against the cold floor. China breaking into pieces, mirroring the fragments of my own breaking heart. A collective hush had fallen over the entire restaurant, every gaze now piercing our table. Harlo loomed above me, her features contorted with pure disgust, while my only son, Carlton, remained glued to his seat, his eyes stubbornly fixed on his napkin. Mom, maybe you should go, he finally managed to mumble, his gaze still stubbornly averted. 60 years old, and I had never, ever felt so utterly diminished. And to think I had been so utterly thrilled for this dinner. It was my birthday, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Carlton had actually called, personally inviting me out. After months of my calls going unanswered, after countless brief, hurried conversations, I truly believed things were finally taking a turn for the better. I'd spent hours getting ready, carefully selecting my best dress, adorning myself with the delicate pearl necklace Robert had given me before he passed away 5 years prior. I arrived at Bellini's, a fancy Italian restaurant far beyond my usual means, clutching a small photo album I had painstakingly put together. It was filled with pictures of Carlton, tracing his life from childhood. I had imagined us sharing dessert, flipping through the pages together. How naive I was. The moment I settled into my chair, the air was thick with palpable tension. Harlo barely acknowledged my existence, her fingers flying furiously across her phone screen. Carlton, meanwhile, fidgeted nervously, his gaze constantly darting to his watch. Still, I tried. God knows, I truly tried. How are the children? I ventured, my voice laced with a desperate longing to hear about my grandchildren. It had been nearly 8 months since I last saw them. They're fine, Harlo snapped, her eyes still glued to her phone, never once meeting mine. I pressed on, forcing a smile despite the ache in my heart. I brought a little gift for Emma's birthday next week. I hope she'll like it. That's when Harlo finally lifted her head. Her eyes, when they met mine, were as cold and sharp as ice shards. We already told you, Bessie. Emma has too many toys. She doesn't need your cheap trinkets. Carlton shifted uncomfortably in his seat, a small, weak protest escaping his lips. Harlo, please. No, Carlton, she cut him off, her voice rising. I'm tired of her trying to buy our children's affection when she was such a terrible mother to you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt as if I'd been slapped. I don't understand, I whispered, my voice barely audible. You never do you? Harlo pressed on, her voice growing steadily louder, drawing more attention. Always playing the victim. Poor Bessie, all alone in that big house. Maybe if you hadn't been so controlling, Carlton wouldn't have needed therapy. Therapy? The word hung in the air, a shock. This was the absolute first I'd heard of it. I turned to my son, my gaze pleading, confused, and deeply hurt. Carlton? He wouldn't meet my eyes. It's nothing, Mom, he mumbled. It's not nothing, Harlo insisted, her voice now a shout. Tell her how she ruined your childhood. Tell her how she never let you be your own person. Just then, the waiter appeared, an unwelcome interruption, awkwardly placing our plates in front of us as Harlo's venomous tirade continued unabated. I sat there, utterly frozen, my mind reeling, utterly unable to process the cruelty unfolding before me. The moment the waiter finally retreated, I tried to reach for Carlton's hand, my voice a desperate plea. "Honey, I don't know what—" That's when Harlo's control finally snapped. She surged to her feet, snatched my plate of pasta, and threw it to the floor. "You witch! You should never have come!" The crash, sudden and violent, silenced the entire restaurant. I felt the burning gaze of strangers on me, their eyes like hot coals, as pasta sauce splattered across my dress and shoes. "Carlton?" I pleaded, my voice breaking, a fragile whisper. "Carlton, please." But my son, the little boy I'd raised alone after Robert died of cancer when Carlton was just 12, the boy I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college, simply sat there, silent, his face etched with shame. Not of Harlo, but of me. I clutched my purse, my hands trembling so violently I could barely stand. "I'm sorry to have ruined your evening," I managed to articulate, my dignity the only thing I had left to hold on to. Then I walked out, my head held high, despite the hot tears streaming uncontrollably down my face. In the solitude of the parking lot, I collapsed into my car and sobbed, deep, gut-wrenching sobs. Through the restaurant window, I could see them, my son and his wife, continuing their meal as if nothing had happened, as if I had never been there at all. I drove home to the house Robert and I had bought 40 years ago, the house where Carlton took his first steps, where he shared his first kiss on the porch, where he told me, with such certainty, that he was going to marry Harlo. The house that, in that moment, suddenly felt too vast, too empty, too full of haunting ghosts. Sleep eluded me that night. Instead, I sat in Robert's old armchair, surrounded by photo albums and cherished memories, relentlessly replaying the evening, desperately trying to understand where I had gone wrong. Had I been controlling? Had I truly ruined Carlton's childhood? The relentless questions hounded me until the first light of dawn. By morning, something profound had shifted inside me. The tears had dried, leaving behind a crisp clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a very long time. "James, it's Bessie Hartman. I need your help." On Monday, Harlo received a letter from my lawyer. Her account had been frozen. What my son and his wife didn't know, what I had kept meticulously secret for years out of a misplaced respect for their perceived independence, was about to change everything. 3 days after the humiliating restaurant incident, I found myself sitting across from James Wilson in his polished office. The cool leather of the chair against my back was a strangely comforting sensation as I watched him meticulously review the documents I had brought. "You sure about this, Bessie?" James asked, peering at me over the rim of his reading glasses. We had known each other for 40 years, ever since he was a fresh-faced young lawyer, and I was a young wife, tirelessly helping my husband build our business from the ground up. "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, my voice steadier, more resolute than it had been in years. James nodded slowly, a deep understanding in his eyes. "It's going to cause quite a stir." "You know," I countered, a faint, resolute smile touching my lips, "I'm counting on it." What Carlton and Harlo didn't know, what I had carefully kept hidden out of some misguided desire to not appear boastful or to overshadow them, was that I wasn't just Carlton's aging mother living on a modest pension. That story, that unassuming facade, was one I had meticulously maintained for years. The truth was far, far different. While Robert had undeniably been the public face of Hartman Construction, I had always been its quiet, unwavering backbone. After his death, instead of selling the company as everyone around me expected, I had quietly, diligently taken the reins. Behind the scenes, I had cultivated and grown the business into one of the most successful construction firms in the entire state. I lived, not out of necessity, but purely by choice. The sprawling colonial house I maintained, though large for one person, was kept mostly for the warmth of memories it held, not to impress anyone. But the most significant secret, the one that touched the core of their lives, was the beautiful colonial home where Carlton and Harlo lived with my beloved grandchildren. The very home they believed Carlton had purchased through his successful career as an investment banker was, in actual fact, mine. I had acquired it 7 years ago. Carlton had mentioned his desire to move into that particular prestigious neighborhood, but admitted he couldn't quite afford it yet. "Let me help," I'd offered. "No, Mom," he had firmly replied. "We don't need your money." So, I had quietly purchased the house through my company and then artfully arranged for them to buy it through a private sale at half its true market value. Carlton genuinely believed he'd stumbled upon a fantastic deal from a highly motivated seller. In reality, I still held the deed, and every single one of their monthly mortgage payments flowed directly into a trust I had meticulously established for my grandchildren's education. It was all perfectly legal, if undeniably somewhat deceptive. I had rationalized it to myself, believing it was what any mother would do, to help without ever wounding a son's pride. Now, I wondered if I had simply been enabling the growing distance between us, allowing them to cling to the illusion that they didn't need me, when in fact, they had been relying on me all along. "The letter should arrive today," James said, his voice gently pulling me from my troubled thoughts. "Are you prepared for the fallout?" The letter he'd meticulously prepared informed Harlo that the credit card she had been freely using, a card she firmly believed was linked to a special account Carlton had set up exclusively for her, was, in truth, secretly supplemented by me. Every single month, when she maxed it out on designer clothes and luxurious spa treatments, it was my money, not Carlton's, covering the exorbitant difference. Carlton himself had no idea. He simply assumed his considerable salary fully covered their lavish lifestyle. It didn't. "I'm prepared," I stated, the words firm, though a deep ache resonated in my heart at the impending storm. It's time for some honesty in this family. I left James's office and drove to the small, familiar cafe where I often sought solace and clarity. As I slowly sipped my tea, my phone vibrated. Carlton's name flashed starkly on the screen. I answered, keeping my voice deliberately neutral. "Hello, Carlton." "Mom, what the hell is going on?" His voice was taut, strained with barely contained anger. "Harlo just got some letter from a lawyer saying her card has been frozen and that I've been supplementing it for the past 5 years. I finished for him, my tone unwavering. "Yes, that's correct." Silence stretched on the other end of the line, thick and heavy. Then, "What are you talking about?" "Carlton," I began, taking a deep, fortifying breath. "We need to have a conversation about finances, about the truth, about your house." "My house? What about my house?" His voice was sharp, edged with confusion. "The house is in my name, Carlton," I explained, my voice steady. "Always has been." Another long, agonizing silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, him desperately processing this seismic information, painstakingly rearranging everything he thought he knew about his entire life. "That's not possible," he finally uttered, his voice laced with disbelief. I have the mortgage. I make the payments every month. Yes, you do, I confirmed. To a trust I established. I own the house, Carlton. I've been helping you financially for years, but after what happened at the restaurant, I've decided it's time for some honesty between us. This is crazy, he sputtered, a raw edge of panic in his voice. You're making this up because Harlo upset you. Mom, this is exactly the kind of controlling behavior she was talking about. His words, sharp and laced with accusation, stung deeply, yet I held my composure. I'll be at home all afternoon, I stated, my voice steady. Come by when you're ready to talk. Bring Harlo if you want. I'll have all the documentation ready. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from resolution. For too long, I'd allowed myself to be pushed to the margins of my son's life, watching from a painful distance as Harlo poisoned him against me. I'd tried to buy their love, or at least their tolerance, with silent financial support and never asking for acknowledgement. No more. 2 hours later, my doorbell chimed. I opened it to find Carlton standing there alone, his face a swirling storm of confusion and anger. Prove it, he demanded, pushing past me and striding into the house. I led him to the dining room, where I'd meticulously laid out all the documents, the deed to their house, bank statements clearly showing my monthly supplements to Harlo's lavish spending, tax records unequivocally proving I still owned Hartman Construction. I don't understand, Carlton whispered, his voice hushed with disbelief as he flipped through the stacks of papers. Why would you hide this from me? From us? I sat down across from him, suddenly feeling the full weight of all 60 of my years. Because you made it clear you didn't want my help, I said softly, my voice tinged with a quiet sadness. But you needed it, and I just wanted to be part of your life, even if you didn't know it. Carlton looked up at me then, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting me implicitly to fix everything. Does Harlo know? He asked, his voice softer now. No. I met his gaze directly. The letter was the first she's heard of it. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so profoundly like his father, it made my heart ache. She's furious. She thinks you're trying to punish her for what happened at the restaurant. And what do you think? I asked, challenging him gently. Carlton looked at me, truly looked at me, perhaps for the very first time in years. I don't know my own mother at all. The next morning, a car door slammed outside my house with enough force to rattle the windows. I was in the kitchen, calmly preparing tea, though I knew exactly who had arrived. Mom! Carlton's voice bellowed as he burst through the front door without bothering to knock. We need to talk now. I deliberately took my time adding honey to my tea, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. When I finally entered the living room, Carlton wasn't alone. Harlo stood beside him, her face flushed crimson with anger, her designer purse clutched like a weapon. Good morning, I said evenly, offering a faint, polite smile. Would either of you like some tea? Cut the act, Harlo snapped, her voice sharp and accusatory. What kind of sick game are you playing? I settled into Robert's old armchair, regarding them both with a calmness I didn't entirely feel. No game, Harlo, just truth. Carlton paced the room, agitated, his strides short and forceful. After our conversation yesterday, I'd expected him to look more humbled. Instead, he seemed reinvigorated, fueled by a renewed anger. You can't just freeze Harlo's accounts, he insisted, stopping abruptly to glare at me. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was for her when her card was declined at Nordstrom in front of everyone? I almost laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. Is that really what concerns you most right now? I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. Embarrassment at a department store? You're trying to control us, Harlo interjected, her voice sharp and cutting. Just like you've always tried to control Carlton. He told me all about his childhood. How you suffocated him after his father died. I set my teacup down. The gentle clink against the saucer was a stark, almost absurd contrast to the suffocating tension in the room. Is that what you believe, Carlton? I asked, looking directly at my son. That I suffocated you? He stopped pacing, his hands curling into tight fists. You never let me make my own decisions, he accused, his voice thick with old resentment. Every time I wanted to do something, play football, go away for summer camp, even my choice of college, you had to weigh in. I weighed in because I was your mother, I said quietly, my gaze unwavering. A single mother trying to raise a son and run a business after her husband died. I wasn't perfect, Carlton, far from it, but everything I did was out of love for you. Love? Harlo scoffed, a derisive sound. If you loved him, you wouldn't manipulate him like this. I fixed my gaze on her, my eyes cool. Like what, exactly? By helping you maintain a lifestyle you clearly can't afford? By giving you a house you couldn't otherwise live in? We don't need your money, Carlton insisted, stepping forward, his voice rising. I make more than enough. No, you don't, I interrupted, surprising even myself with my sudden directness. Carlton, your salary is substantial, yes, but it is demonstrably not enough for the way you and Harlo live. The house alone would consume nearly 70% of your take-home pay if you were actually paying market rate for it. I reached for a folder I'd placed on the side table and handed it to him. These are your financial records for the past 5 years. The withdrawals, the credit card bills, the investments that somehow never seem to mature. He reluctantly took the folder, his hands shaking slightly as he opened it. This is an invasion of privacy, Harlo sputtered, her indignation a thin veil over what I could clearly see was burgeoning fear. Perhaps, I acknowledged, my voice calm. But sometimes the truth needs to be invasive to be heard. Carlton flipped through the pages, his expression slowly shifting from anger to genuine confusion. This can't be right. We don't spend this much on, what is, luxury boutique services? Harlo quickly moved to close the folder, her hand reaching out to snatch it away. It's nothing. Your mother is obviously making things up to come between us. Am I? I asked softly, my eyes fixed on Carlton. Carlton, I've known for years that Harlo has been manipulating you. I stayed silent because I didn't want to lose you completely. Every time I tried to get close, she found a way to push me further away. Made up stories about things I supposedly said or did. That's not true! Harlo's voice rose to a near shriek. Remember when you thought I refused to attend Emma's christening? I continued, ignoring Harlo and addressing only Carlton. I was never invited. Or when you believed I criticized your parenting at Thanksgiving? I wasn't even there. Carlton looked between us, doubt beginning to cloud his features. Mom, Harlo wouldn't. She would, and she did. I continued firmly, my voice unwavering. And I let it happen because I was afraid that if I confronted her, I'd lose any chance of seeing you or my grandchildren. So instead, I helped silently. I bought your house. I supplemented your income. I kept your lifestyle afloat while Harlo systematically cut me out of your lives. Harlo grabbed Carlton's arm, her grip tight. She's lying. She's always been jealous of me, of us. She can't stand that you chose me over her." I couldn't hold back a sad, small laugh. "Oh, Harlo," I murmured. "It was never a competition. At least, it shouldn't have been." Carlton shook off Harlo's grip, a new weariness settling in his eyes as he looked at his wife. "What is luxury boutique services?" he repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. Harlo's cheeks flushed a deeper crimson. "Just some spa treatments. You know I need to look my best." I stayed silent, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. Carlton turned to a specific page in the folder, his finger tracing slowly down a column of figures. $15,000 in spa treatments in 1 month? His voice was laced with utter incredulity. "There's a very exclusive retreat in Arizona," I supplied quietly, my voice calm. "They're known for their discretion and their plastic surgery." The color drained from Harlo's face. "You spied on me?" she accused, her voice thin. "No," I replied, meeting her stunned gaze. "I review all financial transactions related to my accounts. The credit card you've been using is linked to me, remember?" I simply read the statements. Carlton turned to another page, his movements becoming more frantic. "What about these withdrawals? $10,000 here, $15,000 there?" "I don't know what those are for," I admitted truthfully. "Perhaps Harlo can explain." The tension in the room became palpable as Carlton slowly turned to his wife, his eyes now filled with undeniable questions, no longer just anger. For a moment, Harlo looked trapped, completely cornered. Then, her expression hardened, a mask of defiance settling over her features. "This is ridiculous," she declared, her voice sharp and loud. "I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated by a bitter old woman who can't accept that her son has moved on." She snatched her purse from the couch and headed for the door, pausing only to look back at Carlton. "Are you coming?" Carlton stood frozen, the damning folder still clutched in his hands, clearly torn between two worlds. "She's using money to manipulate you, Carlton," Harlo insisted, her voice pleading now. "Just like she always has. Don't let her come between us." I remained seated, my heart pounding a heavy rhythm against my ribs. This was the moment, the precipice. Would Carlton finally see the truth, the raw, painful truth? Or would he once again choose the carefully constructed reality Harlo had so meticulously built for him? He looked at me, and for the first time in years, he truly saw me. Not the controlling mother Harlo had convinced him I was, but the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. "Mom," he began, his voice uncertain, fragile. "It's your choice, Carlton," I said softly, my voice filled with a quiet finality. "It always has been." Harlo's face contorted with pure fury. "If you stay here with her," she spat, her voice venomous, "don't bother coming home." The ultimatum hung in the air like a thundercloud, heavy and ominous. Carlton looked at the folder in his hands, then at his wife, then back at me. He closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them. "I need time to think," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Harlo's laugh was bitter, sharp with disbelief. "Unbelievable! She's done it again!" She stormed out, the front door slamming behind her with enough force to shake the entire house. Carlton and I were left alone, the immense weight of decades of misunderstandings and manipulations hanging heavy and silent between us. "I never wanted it to come to this," I said quietly, my voice barely audible in the suddenly vast stillness of the room. "Then why did you?" he asked, sinking onto the couch, suddenly looking utterly exhausted. "Because sometimes," I replied, my voice gentle but firm, Love means fighting for the truth, even when it hurts. Carlton didn't stay long after Harlo left. He needed space, he said. Time to process everything. I understood. The very foundations of his life had just been violently shaken. He needed to find his footing again, on his own terms. I spent the next few days in a strange, unsettling limbo, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Would Carlton come back? Would Harlo, with her manipulative prowess, find yet another way to spin this to regain control? I busied myself with work, profoundly grateful for the distraction of spreadsheets and client calls, for anything that would keep my mind from churning. On Thursday afternoon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Martha Pierce, my oldest and dearest friend, standing on my porch. We'd known each other since high school, long before Robert, before Carlton, before life had carved its complicated, often painful paths through our hearts. "I brought wine," she announced, holding up a bottle of Merlot, her smile warm. "You look like you need it." I couldn't help but smile back. Martha had never been one for subtlety, a trait I adored. "That obvious, huh?" She followed me into the kitchen, watching as I fetched glasses. "Bessie, you've been sending all your calls to voicemail for 3 days. Your yard hasn't been fussed over in a week." She peered at me closely, her gaze sharp and knowing. "And," she added, "you're wearing the same cardigan you had on when I stopped by on Monday." I glanced down at myself. She was right, of course. "So," she continued, pouring generous glasses for both of us, the rich red liquid swirling into the crystal. "Are you going to tell me what's going on, or do I have to drag it out of you?" I sighed, taking a fortifying sip of wine before launching into the whole sordid tale. The restaurant incident, the revelation about the house and finances, the raw confrontation with Carlton and Harlo. Martha listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled with each detail. "Oh, Bessie," she said softly when I finally finished, the silence in the kitchen heavy with unspoken thoughts. I knew things were strained with Carlton, but I had no idea it had gotten this bad. Neither did I, really. I admitted, a bitter taste in my mouth. I've been so busy trying to stay in their lives that I didn't see how truly toxic it had become. Martha took a thoughtful sip of her wine, her gaze distant for a moment. "There's something you should know," she said finally, her voice hesitant. "Something I probably should have told you years ago." My stomach tightened, a cold knot forming deep within me. "What is it?" She set her glass down, choosing her words carefully, deliberately. "About 3 years ago, I saw Harlo at the Lakeside Hotel. She was with a man, not Carlton." I stared at her, uncomprehending at first. "You mean they were very intimate?" Martha confirmed with a somber nod. "Yes. I didn't say anything at the time because I wasn't absolutely certain, and I didn't want to cause problems if there was an innocent explanation." 3 years ago," I repeated slowly, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "That's when they were having problems. Carlton told me they were seeing a marriage counselor." Martha grimaced, a look of distaste crossing her face. "Unless the counselor was a tall man with a goatee who liked to kiss her in hotel lobbies, I don't think that's what was happening." I felt sick to my stomach, a profound nausea washing over me. Not just at the revelation of Harlo's brazen infidelity, but at the chilling realization that I'd unwittingly been financing it all. Those mysterious withdrawals, the extravagant spa retreats. Had I been paying for her to cheat on my son? "There's more," Martha said reluctantly, her voice hushed. "Last year, at Maggie Wilson's retirement party, Harlo had too much to drink. She was bragging to some women about how she had this perfect setup. A husband who didn't question her spending, and a mother-in-law who unwittingly bankrolled her entire lifestyle. She knew, I whispered, horrified, the realization a cold dread. All this time she knew I was supplementing their income? Martha nodded, her gaze sympathetic. From what she said, she figured it out years ago. She even thought it was hilarious. Her words, not mine, that you were trying to be so secretive about it. I felt as if I'd been physically punched, the air knocked from my lungs. All this time, I thought I was helping Carlton, protecting his pride while quietly ensuring he and his family had the life they wanted. Instead, I'd been played for a fool by Harlo, manipulated just as thoroughly as my own son had been. I need to tell Carlton, I said, reaching instinctively for my phone. Martha gently laid her hand over mine, her touch grounding. Are you sure that's wise? He's already dealing with so much. I hesitated, the phone still clutched in my hand. He deserves to know the truth, all of it. Yes, but timing matters, Bessie, she counseled softly. He's just had his world turned upside down. Maybe give him a little time to adjust before adding to it. She was right, of course. My rational mind knew it. But before I could respond, my phone vibrated in my hand. Carlton's name flashed on the screen. It's him, I told Martha, my heart suddenly racing as I answered. Carlton, is everything all right? His voice was tight, controlled in a way that immediately worried me. I need to see you. Can I come over? Of course, I said, rising to my feet. I'm home now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up without saying goodbye. Martha stood, gathering her purse. I should go. This sounds like a conversation you two need to have alone. I walked her to the door, profoundly grateful for her unwavering friendship, but dreading what was to come. Thank you, Martha, for the wine and for the truth. She squeezed my hand warmly. Call me later. And Bessie, be gentle with him. Finding out your life isn't what you thought it was. That's a hard pill to swallow. Carlton arrived exactly 20 minutes later, his face drawn and pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Come in, I said, stepping aside, opening the door wider. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Something stronger? Nothing, he replied, moving past me into the living room, his gaze distant. He paced for a moment, then turned abruptly to face me, his expression unreadable. I found something, he said, his voice oddly flat, devoid of emotion. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. Inside were bank statements. Not the ones I'd shown him before, but others. Account numbers I didn't recognize, transactions to places I'd never heard of. One name, however, jumped out at me, cold and stark. Bahamas Private Banking Limited. What is this? I asked, though a sinking feeling deep in my gut told me I already knew. Harlo has a secret account, Carlton said, his voice cracking slightly on the words. She's been transferring money, our money, into it for years. Over $300,000. I sat down heavily, the statements clutched tightly in my hand. Oh, Carlton, I breathed, my heart aching for him. I'm so sorry. He laughed then, a bitter, hollow sound that held no humor, only bitter irony. You're sorry? I'm the one who should be apologizing. You tried to tell me, and I wouldn't listen. I believed her lies about you because it was easier than facing the truth, that I married someone who never loved me. He said simply, his voice hollow. Someone who saw me, saw us, as nothing but a means to an end. I wanted desperately to comfort him, to tell him that surely it wasn't that bad. But I couldn't bring myself to lie. Not now, when truth was finally, brutally breaking through. "There's more," he continued, sinking onto the couch across from me, his shoulders slumped. "I hired a private investigator." My eyes widened slightly. "Carlton, that's necessary," he finished firmly, cutting me off. "I needed to know how deep this went. And Mom," his voice broke, fragile and raw, "it's worse than I thought." The investigator had uncovered not just the affair Martha had witnessed, but multiple relationships Harlo had cultivated over the years. Worse still, Harlo had been systematically stealing from them, meticulously building her own secret nest egg while planning her elaborate escape. "She was going to leave," Carlton said, his voice a ghost of itself. "The investigator found emails. She and this man she's been seeing, they were planning to take the kids and move to the Bahamas once she'd squirreled away enough money." I reached for his hand, and to my surprise, he let me take it, his fingers clinging to mine. "The children," I said softly, my heart aching for my grandchildren. "How are they?" "Confused. Harlo told them I'm on a business trip." His eyes filled with unshed tears, glistening brightly. "I haven't figured out how to tell them that their mother has been lying to all of us." We sat in silence for a moment, the immense weight of everything pressing down on us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Carlton spoke again, his voice gaining a fragile strength. "I've been such a fool, Mom, and not just about Harlo." He squeezed my hand, a silent apology. "I let her convince me that you were the enemy, that you were controlling and manipulative, when all along it was her." "We were both deceived," I said gently, trying to ease his self-reproach. He shook his head, a gesture of profound regret. "No, I should have seen it. The way she isolated me from you, from my friends. The way she always had an explanation for everything. The missing money, the late nights, the constant criticism of you. I wanted so badly to believe we had this perfect life that I ignored all the signs it was falling apart. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, to absolve him, but I knew he needed to work through this himself, to own his part in it before he could truly heal. Instead, I simply asked, 'What will you do now?'" Carlton straightened, a quiet resolve settling over his features. A familiar strength that reminded me so much of Robert, it made my heart ache anew. "I've frozen all our accounts. I've contacted a lawyer, not just about a divorce, but about pressing charges for the theft." He hesitated, his gaze meeting mine. "And Mom," he said, his voice soft, almost vulnerable, "I need to ask you a huge favor." "Anything?" I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. "Can the kids and I stay here for a while? Just until I figure things out." For the first time in years, a fragile flicker of hope fluttered in my chest, warm and unexpected. "Of course you can," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is your home too. It always has been." Later that night, after Carlton left to pack some things for himself and the children, I stood in my kitchen, looking out at the backyard where he used to play as a boy. So much had changed. So much pain had been inflicted. But maybe, just maybe from these broken pieces, we could build something new, something honest. My phone buzzed with a text from Martha. "Everything okay?" I thought for a moment before replying, "No, but I think someday it might be." 2 weeks later, my quiet house had transformed into a vibrant, bustling home again. The joyful sound of children's laughter filled rooms that had been silent for far too long. Emma, 7, and Jacob, 5, brought a chaotic, exhilarating energy that both exhausted and invigorated me in equal measure. "Grandma, watch this!" Jacob called out, executing a wobbly somersault in the living room. Very impressive, I applauded, though my heart skipped a beat as he narrowly missed the coffee table. Maybe we should practice outside next time. Carlton appeared in the doorway, looking more rested and at peace than he had in days. Jacob, what did we say about acrobatics in the house? My grandson sighed dramatically, a practiced protest. That we save them for the backyard. Exactly. Why don't you and Emma go see if the sprinkler is still on? It's hot enough. The children didn't need to be told twice, racing outside with whoops of pure excitement. Carlton collapsed onto the couch beside me, letting out a long, weary breath. I don't know how you did it, he mused, staring out the window. Raising me alone all those years. I smiled, gently patting his hand. One day at a time, sometimes 1 minute at a time. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the backyard where his children were now running gleefully through the sprinkler, their delighted screams carrying faintly through the open windows. The divorce papers are filed, he said quietly, the news hanging in the air. Harlo's lawyer reached out yesterday. What does she want? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Everything, he said with a mirthless laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. The house, custody of the kids, alimony. She's claiming I turned you against her, and that you're using your financial position to punish her. I shook my head, entirely unsurprised by her familiar tactics. And what did your lawyer say? That she doesn't have a leg to stand on. The financial records clearly show she was stealing from us. Plus, he hesitated, then continued, his voice grim. The private investigator found more evidence of affairs. Multiple affairs, Mom, going back years. I squeezed his hand, saying nothing. Some wounds were still too fresh for platitudes or easy reassurances. I just keep thinking about all the signs I missed, he continued, his voice filled with regret. All the times I defended her to you, convinced she was right and you were just trying to control our lives. I was so blind. We see what we want to see sometimes, I replied gently, looking at him. Especially when it comes to people we love. He finished, his eyes meeting mine. He looked at me, truly looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years, the full weight of his apologies in his gaze. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything, for believing her lies about you, for shutting you out, for the way she treated you at the restaurant. You don't need to apologize, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, I do, he insisted, his grip tightening on my hand. I was wrong, and I've spent too many years letting Harlo come between us. I felt tears sting my eyes, a warmth spreading through me. Well, we're here now. That's what matters. Outside, Emma let out a particularly loud shriek as Jacob aimed the sprinkler directly at her. Carlton smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. They've missed you, he said, his voice soft. Even though Harlo limited their time with you, they've always talked about Grandma Bessie and her cookies and her stories. My heart swelled, a warm, expansive feeling. They're remarkable children. They are, he agreed, his gaze still fixed on the pure joy of his children. And they deserve better than what they've had. A mother who was more interested in her social standing than their happiness. A father who was too wrapped up in maintaining appearances to see what was happening right in front of him. You're being too hard on yourself, I said firmly, reaching to pat his arm. You're a good father, Carlton. Look at how you've handled all this. Protecting them, keeping their routine as normal as possible, despite everything falling apart. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I'm trying. It's just a lot. One day at a time. I reminded him, a gentle echo of my earlier words. The next morning, while Carlton took the children to their summer day camp, I made a decision. It was time to stop hiding. Time to reclaim my own life, fully and without reservation. I started with a call to James. I want to go public with my role at Hartman Construction, I told him, my voice firm with newfound resolve. No more hiding behind Robert's legacy or male executives. It's time people knew who's really been running things all these years. James didn't sound surprised. About time, if you ask me. The board will support you. They know you're the reason the company has thrived. Next, I called Martha. I'm having a dinner party on Saturday, I announced cheerfully. Nothing fancy, just a few friends. It's been too long since I entertained. Bessie Hartman, social butterfly, Martha teased, her voice light with amusement. Oh, what brought this on? Life's too short to spend it alone, waiting for permission to live, I replied. Will you come? Wild horses couldn't keep me away. By Saturday, my dining room table was elegantly set for 8. Martha and her husband, my old friend David, who'd recently been widowed, James and his wife, Carlton, and me. The children were enjoying a supervised playdate with friends, giving Carlton a much-needed evening among adults. It felt strange at first, hosting again after so many years of quiet solitude. But as wine was poured and conversation flowed freely, I felt something inside me unfurling like a flower too long kept in the dark. To new beginnings, James toasted, raising his glass, his eyes sparkling. And old friends, I added, my voice warm, looking around at the familiar faces of people who had known me, the real me all along. Later, as we moved to the living room for coffee, David sat beside me on the sofa. It's good to see you like this, Bessie, he said, his voice warm and sincere. Reminds me of the dinner parties you and Robert used to throw. You always had a gift for bringing people together. I smiled, genuinely touched by the memory. It's been too long. Life gets in the way sometimes, he agreed, a shadow of sadness passing over his features. After Margaret died, I couldn't bear the thought of socializing, but eventually, I realized she wouldn't have wanted me to stop living. That's exactly it, I said softly, the realization crystal clear. I've been existing, not living, trying so hard to stay connected to Carlton that I lost touch with everything else that makes life worthwhile. David nodded, understanding profound in his eyes. Well, if you're looking to make up for lost time, there's a symphony performance next weekend. I happen to have an extra ticket. I felt a flutter of something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Possibility. I'd like that, I said, a genuine smile gracing my lips. Across the room, I caught Carlton watching us, a small, knowing smile playing at his lips. When our eyes met, he gave me a subtle nod of approval. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, Carlton found me in the kitchen, washing the last of the dishes. I can't remember the last time I saw you laugh like that, he said, picking up a towel to dry. It's been a while, I admitted, a soft sigh escaping me. I'm glad, Mom. You deserve to be happy. He paused, then added, a hint of teasing in his voice. David seems nice? I felt my cheeks warm slightly. He's just an old friend. Carlton hummed skeptically. An old friend who couldn't take his eyes off you all evening. I swatted him playfully with a dish towel. Stop it. We're both too old for that sort of thing. You're never too old for connection, he said, suddenly serious, his gaze direct. That's one thing this whole mess with Harlo has taught me. Life's too short to spend it with people who don't value you. I nodded, understanding completely. the words resonating deeply. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," he replied, bumping my shoulder affectionately. "Even if I was too stubborn to listen for a while." As I climbed into bed that night, I felt different, lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. The constant worry about Carlton, the gnawing fear of being completely cut out of his life, the careful dance of trying to help without being seen as interfering. All of it had consumed me for so long. Now, for the first time in years, I was thinking about my own life again, my own happiness, not just as Carlton's mother or Robert's widow or the secret CEO of Hartman Construction, but as Bessie, a woman with her own desires, her own future stretching out before her. The next morning, I woke early and did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the small lake outside town where Robert and I used to picnic when we were first married. I sat on the weathered bench that overlooked the shimmering water, watching the sunrise paint the sky in breathtaking shades of pink and gold. "I think I'm finally ready to move forward," I whispered into the crisp morning air, feeling Robert's presence in the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves around me. "To build something new." As if in answer, my phone chimed with a text from Carlton. "Kids want to know if Grandma's making pancakes this morning." I smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through me, and typed back, "On my way home now. Tell them to get the blueberries ready." Home. It was home again, filled with laughter and love and possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine just a few short weeks ago, and I was ready for all of it. 6 months can change everything. As autumn gave way to winter, the profound transformation in our lives continued, each day bringing new challenges and unexpected joys. The divorce proceedings dragged on, with Harlo fighting every step of the way. Her initial exorbitant demands had slowly given way to increasingly desperate tactics as her legal position weakened. When the undeniable evidence of her multiple affairs and systematic financial misconduct became impossible to deny, she changed strategies, suddenly casting herself as a victim of a controlling husband and a manipulative mother-in-law. "She's claiming emotional abuse now," Carlton told me one evening after the children were in bed, a weary sigh escaping him. "Says I isolated her and monitored her spending." I shook my head, marveling at her sheer audacity. "Does she really think that will work?" "Her lawyer advised against it," he replied, rubbing his temples. "But Harlo's never been good at taking advice. She's convinced she can still win this." Despite the ongoing legal battle, life in our home had settled into a comfortable, even joyful rhythm. Carlton had taken a leave of absence from his high-pressure job to focus on the children and himself, working part-time from home as a consultant. I, meanwhile, had officially stepped into the powerful role of CEO at Hartman Construction. No longer hiding behind proxies and figureheads, the announcement had caused quite a stir in the business community. "Widow revealed as secret CEO, How Bessie Hartman Built an Empire While Staying in the Shadows," read one particularly dramatic headline. "You're famous, Grandma," Emma had declared, proudly showing me a newspaper article one of her friends had brought to school. "My teacher says you're an inspiration." The house I had once thought too big, too empty, was now perpetually filled with life. Jacob's myriad toys cluttered the living room floor. Emma's colorful artwork adorned the refrigerator door. Carlton's laptop and papers spread across the dining table each evening, a sign of his renewed focus. And I found myself at the very center of it all, no longer relegated to the edges of my son's life, but an integral, cherished part of it. On a crisp December morning, as a fresh dusting of snow softened the ground outside, I stood in my kitchen preparing breakfast when Carlton entered. a strange, unreadable expression on his face. "Everything okay?" I asked, flipping a pancake with a practiced flick of my wrist. He held up a simple envelope. "It just came by courier. It's from Harlo's lawyer." I set down the spatula, my heart rate quickening almost imperceptibly. "What does it say?" "I haven't opened it yet." He took a deep, fortifying breath, then slowly tore open the envelope and scanned the contents. Slowly, a look of profound disbelief spread across his face, replacing the earlier tension. "She's dropping the custody fight," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, laced with shock. "She's agreed to supervised visitation only twice a month." I stared at him, stunned. Why would she give up now, after fighting so hard? "Because of this," he said, handing me another paper from the envelope, a grainy photograph of Harlo with a man I didn't recognize, boarding a private plane. "She's been living with him in Miami for the past month. According to the investigator, she missed her last 3 scheduled court appearances because she wasn't even in the state." I sat down heavily, the weight of this new information settling upon me. "She's abandoned her own children." I breathed, the words a raw statement of fact. Carlton nodded, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face. Relief, anger, sadness, all interwoven. "The lawyer says she's willing to sign over all parental rights in exchange for a lump sum payment and an agreement that I won't press criminal charges for the financial theft. Are you going to agree?" He ran a hand through his hair, a clear conflict in his eyes. Part of me wants to see her face consequences for what she did, but another part just wants this over with for the kid's sake. I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." In the end, Carlton chose peace over retribution. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later. Full custody granted to Carlton, a reasonable lump sum payment to Harlo that was far less than she'd initially demanded, and the sale of the house they had shared. "What will you do with the money from the house?" I asked as we signed the final paperwork at James's office. "Put it in a trust for the kids," Carlton replied without hesitation, his voice firm. "It's their future, not mine." James smiled approvingly. "I can help set that up for you. And Bessie, now that this is settled, we should discuss your estate planning as well." I nodded, a decision I'd been contemplating for months finally crystallizing. "Yes, there are changes I want to make." That evening, while the children played in the backyard, Carlton and I sat on the porch, mugs of hot chocolate warming our hands against the crisp winter chill. "I've been thinking," he said, breaking a comfortable silence. "We should move out, find our own place." I felt a pang of disappointment, though I tried not to show it. "Oh, well, of course, if that's what you want. This arrangement was always meant to be temporary." "No, Mom, you misunderstood," he clarified quickly, a small smile playing on his lips. "I meant we should all move together. This house, it's full of memories, but maybe it's time for a fresh start, somewhere new for all of us." I looked at him in surprise, my heart doing a little leap. "You want us to continue living together?" He nodded, suddenly looking uncertain. "Unless you'd rather have your space back. I know we've invaded your quiet life pretty thoroughly." "Invaded?" I laughed, the word so at odds with how I felt. "Carlton, having you and the children here has been the greatest joy of my life. I was just afraid you might want more independence." "We've had enough separation in this family," he said firmly, his gaze steady. "Emma and Jacob adore you, and honestly, I don't know what I would have done these past months without you. We're a team now." Tears pricked my eyes, but they were tears of pure happiness. I'd love that. A new home for all of us. We found the perfect place 2 weeks later. A spacious house with a large yard, close enough to the children's school and my office, with a separate wing that gave me my own space while keeping me connected to the family. Carlton insisted on paying half, using his consulting income. "It's not about pride anymore," he explained when I tried to wave away his contribution. "It's about partnership. We're building this new life together, Mom. Equal partners." The day we signed the papers for the new house, I finalized another important document with James: my new will. Unlike the division Harlo had likely expected, where my assets would simply go to her and Carlton with nothing truly for me, this will reflected our new, profound reality. My estate would be divided equally between Carlton and my grandchildren, with specific provisions for their education and future. Moving day arrived in early spring. As I stood in the empty living room of the house Robert and I had shared for 40 years, a flood of memories washed over me. Carlton taking his first steps across this very floor. Robert's booming laugh echoing from the kitchen. Years of joyful Christmas mornings and boisterous birthday celebrations. And then, the quiet, solitary evenings alone after they were both gone from my life. "Ready, Mom?" Carlton asked from the doorway, Emma and Jacob peering. Around him curiously, their faces alight with excitement. I took a deep breath, a breath of both melancholy and anticipation, and nodded. "Ready." Our new home welcomed us with bright, open spaces and boundless possibilities. We spent that first weekend unpacking and arranging, making the house truly our own, imbuing it with our shared spirit. David came by with a thoughtful housewarming gift, a beautiful wind chime for the back porch, and stayed for dinner. His easy conversation and warm laughter fit seamlessly into our newly formed family circle. That night, after the children were sound asleep and Carlton had retired to his room, I sat alone on the new back porch, listening to the gentle, melodic sound of David's wind chime dancing in the soft spring breeze. The stars above seemed especially bright, as if celebrating with us. My phone buzzed with a text. "Martha, how's the new place?" I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile, and typed back, "It feels like home already." Her response came quickly. "Of course it does. Home isn't a place. It's the people you share it with." She was right, of course. For years I had clung desperately to the past, to the physical reminders of what my family had been. I had tried to buy my way into Carlton's life, silently supporting him financially while accepting emotional scraps in return. But real connection couldn't be purchased. Real family couldn't be maintained through secret bank transfers and silent sacrifices. It required honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to speak difficult, sometimes painful, truths. The path to where we were now had been fraught with difficulty. At times, excruciatingly painful. There had been moments of heartbreak so acute I thought I might not recover. But through it all, something stronger, more resilient had emerged. A relationship with my son based on mutual respect and genuine understanding, not obligation or manipulation. And beyond that, I had reclaimed myself. No longer just someone's mother or widow, but Bessie. A woman with her own identity, her own strength, her own future stretching out vibrantly before her. The house Harlo had coveted so desperately was finally sold. The insidious control she had wielded over our family was irrevocably broken. The secrets that had kept us isolated from each other were exposed to light and air, allowing healing to finally begin. I looked up at the stars once more, feeling a profound, deep sense of peace settle over me. The fortune I had hidden for so long was now being used openly, joyfully, to build something far more valuable than any material possession, a family bound by love and truth, not by secrets and obligation. In the end, what Harlo had so spectacularly failed to understand was that the true wealth was never in the house or the bank accounts. It was in the connections we built, the trust we earned, the love we shared. And that was something no one could ever take away from us again. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.